Everyone thinks the keto Ozempic results is higher doses, but they're completely wrong. In fact, most of my patients are getting better results at lower doses. And today, I'm gonna show you the 5 steps that could literally double your results without doubling your medication. Now, when I say double your results, I need to be clear about what that means. I'm not promising that you're gonna lose twice as many pounds per week. That's wild talk. That's not how sustainable fat loss works. But what I'm talking about is doubling the quality of your results. That means losing twice as much fat while preserving the muscle mass on your body, which is gonna prevent metabolic shutdown. That's the 80% of reason why GLP-1 users get all screwed up to begin with. And you're gonna do all of this on a lower dose of your medication, which means fewer side effects, fewer complications. The doubling happens in fat loss, muscle maintenance, and most important, sustainability, not just the numbers on the scale. I'm Dr. Jones, DC, and I coach thousands of patients on optimizing GLP-1 medications and peptide therapy through lifestyle interventions. This passion comes from my own 100-pound weight loss journey at the age of 16, so I know what it's like to struggle with weight and then overcome it. Now I work with my medical practitioners, helping patients like you achieve results that they never thought was possible by addressing underlying issues, specifically insulin resistance and inflammation, instead of just chasing higher doses. Now, you'll want to work with your healthcare provider on many of the things that we're going to talk about today, especially when it comes to adjusting medication doses or adding peptides. But let me give you the framework first so you understand exactly how we're going to double your results with these 5 pillars. Pillar number 1, peptide enhancement. This will double your metabolic flexibility, aka making you a better fat burner. It makes fasting accessible even if you've never been able to do it before. Pillar number 2, strategic fasting. This one doubles your insulin sensitivity improvement that you get from GLP-1s alone. Pillar number 3, diet optimization. This is going to double your fat to muscle loss ratio compared to just restricting calories. Pillar number 4, resistance training, doubles your metabolic preservation so that you don't hit those inevitable plateaus. And then pillar number 5, putting all this together, doubles your safety with individualization compared to cookie cutter telehealth protocols. When you stack these 5 pillars together, the effects multiply, and that's how we're doubling and often tripling the quality of your results compared to standard protocols. So here's the brutal truth. Most people using GLP-1 medications are following a cookie cutter titration schedule, which means they're just increasing their dose every 4 weeks regardless of how they're responding. And I want to be crystal clear here. There are excellent physicians out there who individualize their protocols and only increase doses when patients truly need it. And if you're working with a doctor like that, you're friggin' lucky. But the reality is most people are getting GLP-1s today aren't working with doctors like that. They're working with massive telehealth companies where one doctor is signing off on friggin' thousands of patients. There's no real guidance. There's no structure. You're just winging it. No individualization, just cookie cutter protocols, a schedule that increases your dose every 4 weeks like clockwork. Here's what the standard schedule looks like, and this probably sounds all too familiar to you. You started on semaglutide at 0.25 milligrams every single week. 4 weeks later, you automatically bump to 0.5. 4 weeks later, 1 milligram, then 1.7, then 2.4. This is the exact dosing schedule for semaglutide, Wegovy, or Ozempic. Doesn't matter if you're responding well at a lower dose. Doesn't matter if you're experiencing side effects. The schedule says increase, so you increase. And if you're on tirzepatide, which is also Mounjaro Zepbound, that's 2.5 milligrams, then 5, then 10, maybe 12, and then 15. And look, on paper, this makes sense. Higher doses suppress your appetite more. More appetite suppression equals less food. Less food equals more weight loss. It's simple math, right? Wrong, because this entire approach misses the fundamental problem. Your body didn't gain weight only because you had too much appetite and you ate too many calories. See, there's a lot more that was involved in that process. Your body gained fat and you probably lost muscle because your cells stopped listening to insulin. See, that's insulin resistance. When your cells are insulin resistant, they can't properly process the energy that you're eating. So your body stores it as fat instead of burning it as fuel. Let me take you back to one of our patients, Jessica. She's a 38-year-old nurse who came to us after 4 months of this exact protocol from her telehealth provider. They started her at 0.25 milligrams of semaglutide, then 0.5, then 1, and by month 4, she was at the maximum dose. She was miserable. Dr. Jones, I feel like shit. She's like, the nausea is constant. I'm barely eating. We found out she was only eating about 800 calories a day. And to make matters worse, I haven't lost weight in 6 weeks. We looked at her symptoms. She was cold all the time, exhausted despite sleeping for 8 hours, brain fog so bad she could barely focus at work. Classic symptoms of metabolic adaptation, aka battery saving mode, aka zombie mode. They said that I've hit a plateau and that I need more medication. And that's literally what most people are told. I looked at her like she had 3 heads. Jessica, you're not in a plateau. You're in metabolic shutdown. Adding more medication is like pressing harder on the gas pedal when your engine's already flooded. You need someone that's actually looking at what's happening in your body, not just following a schedule. So here's what we did with her instead. We dropped her dose back to 0.5 milligram. The problem was that she needed to fix her insulin resistance and get her metabolism firing again. The GLP-1 is a tool to make that process easier, not the solution itself. So we added AOD 9604 peptide to help her mobilize more fat. We're going to talk about that in section number 1. We implemented strategic fasting windows to drive insulin levels down. We got her eating more protein to preserve muscle mass. And of course, we got her butt to the gym and got her lifting weights properly. We call that hypertrophy. All of these are the foundation of the 5 pillars that you're going to learn about today. 3 months later, she lost another 18 pounds at half of the medication dose. 0 nausea, energy back, brain fog gone. And here's the key. Her body composition completely changed. She wasn't just losing weight, she was losing fat while maintaining muscle. Now, if you're in a similar situation on a cookie cutter protocol that's not working for you or causing side effects that you shouldn't have to deal with, you don't have to figure this out alone. You can actually book a discovery call with our medical team to get personalized guidance. I'll leave a link to this in the description where you can actually get that booked. Now, let me show you what made this transformation possible with my own experience. If this different approach to GLP-1 optimization is resonating with you, especially the idea of lower doses with proper support, then you're going to want to hit that subscribe button right now because we put out 2 videos every single week that break down metabolic health strategies, peptide optimization, and GLP-1 protocols. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now because it helps out the channel and makes it easier to give you guys this information. What I'm about to show you next is the super secret that makes all of this possible. Pillar number 1, fat mobilizing peptide therapy. This is super exciting, and this is why our clinic takes a completely different approach than many of these large telehealth operations. A lot of you guys didn't even know that you can take these peptides with your GLP-1s. The doctors that I work with don't follow rigid schedules. They're fixing the root cause with proper supervision, and that starts with the pillar of peptides. This is a super secret that doubles your metabolic flexibility, especially for people with conditions like PCOS, diabetes, or chronic inflammation. Okay, so here's the problem we're solving. Fasting is one of the most powerful tools for reversing insulin resistance. But for a lot of people, and we're going to get into fasting next, but for a lot of you, you have hormonal issues, diabetes, high levels of cortisol and stress. Fasting feels impossible, not just difficult, impossible. The main culprit, cortisol, your body's main stress hormone. You see, when you fast, your body needs to access stored fat for energy. But if your metabolism is inflexible, this term metabolic flexibility, meaning your body struggles to switch between burning sugar, carbohydrates, and burning fat, it triggers a stress response. Your body's cortisol spikes and other stress hormones. The elevated cortisol does 3 terrible things. It makes you much more hungry, it blocks fat burning, and it keeps insulin resistance high. So you get into this vicious cycle. You try to fast to fix insulin resistance because fasting is the most powerful way to do that, in my opinion. But the fasting itself spikes your cortisol, and the cortisol blocks your ability to actually improve. So you're trying to achieve this improvement by doing some fasting, but you can't get the improvement because their insulin levels are high. And that's what makes you feel awful. You end up stopping the fast and you think fasting just doesn't work for me. And for years, this was true for a lot of our patients. Artificially induced metabolic flexibility. They help your body tap into stored fat more easily so that you don't get the massive stress response during fasting. Okay, so let's start with Sloop 332. This is an investigational peptide showing lots of promise and early research for activating certain cell receptors that help regulate metabolism. The patients that our doctors prescribe this to and other metabolic enhancing peptides often report improvements in how their body responds to fasting because it's burning fat more easily, and that's the energy source that your body needs when you're fasting. The other peptide, AOD 9604, this one is a fragment of human growth hormone that patients my doctors prescribe to, same thing. When you use these peptides together, you're enhancing your body's ability to access fat stores efficiently. Your body doesn't perceive that the fast is going into starvation because your body can readily tap into fuel. So there's a really strong synergy between this. Create the calorie deficit from the fast, but then allow your body to feed itself from the peptides. This is why I call this the super secret for PCOS, diabetics, or anybody with a stressed metabolic system. PCOS patients who who could never fast for more than 16 hours, who would feel awful when they try to push it, are now able to do 24-hour plus fasts comfortably. Diabetics whose blood sugar would crash during fasting can now maintain energy. People with chronic stress who would get brain fog and irritability can fast without that cortisol-driven misery. Now, I need to be clear about something. Peptides are prescription medications that require medical oversight. You can't just order these freaking things online and dose yourself. Quick question for you. Before we dive into the fasting protocol next, traditional dieting versus this approach with GLP-1s and peptides. What team are you on? Drop it in the comments and tell us your experience. Have you fasted with GLP-1s, or were you told that you shouldn't do that? This is going to create a bit of an environment for people to feel comfortable that they can do both. Pillar number 2, strategic fasting. And here's why this is so critical. Fasting and GLP-1 meds both fix insulin resistance, but when you combine them, you're talking about doubling your insulin improvement compared to either approach alone. The combo here is so powerful. So think of it this way. GLP-1s improve insulin sensitivity by mimicking a hormone that tells your body to release insulin more efficiently and make your cells more responsive to it. But insulin is still being released every time you eat. Fasting, on the other hand, gives your body extended breaks where insulin stays low. And when insulin is lower for extended periods of time, your body gets a chance to freaking breathe, right? A chance to restore their sensitivity. The receptors that stopped listening to insulin, remember that, insulin resistance, they start becoming more responsive again. And in our clinic, patients who combine GLP-1s with strategic fasting typically see their insulin resistance improve much more dramatically than those doing either approach alone. Though we're still learning exactly how powerful that combination can be between different patients, but the main piece of it is that this will fix the root cause. And then eating lower carbohydrates, high protein, resistance training, these are all going to be the next layers that we're going to talk about next. But nothing reverses insulin resistance faster than strategic fasting combined with GLP-1s. Now, here's how we structure this in our clinic. It's a 3-phase progression, and this is critical, so pay attention to this. You don't want to just jump into extended fasting. And I know you might be excited to fast. You've seen a lot of people talk about it, but you got to build the skill, because if you progress too quickly, you'll hurt yourself and you'll regret it. Phase number 1 is simple time-restricted eating. Start with a 16-hour fasted window and an 8-hour eating window. And for most people, this means skipping breakfast, but you can also skip dinner too as well, and eating in that 8 hours, say for example, noon to 8 if you're going to skip breakfast, or maybe 8 to 4 p.m. if you're going to skip dinner. Okay, so you stay in phase 1 for say 2 to 4 weeks until your body adapts. You're starting to use fat for fuel. You're feeling comfortable with this window. Phase 2 is where we introduce a 24-hour fast. You start off with just going for a 24-hour fast, and you might be able to hit this on your first go. And if you can, and you likely will if you're doing GLP-1s and those earlier fat mobilizing peptides, then you go for a second 24-hour. You can or can't do. You want to give yourself say 2 to 4 weeks playing around with the 24-hour fast, slowly, and listening to your body. If you're very stressed out, maybe you only want to try this 1 time per week, but eventually you work in this stage where you're trying to increase to the point where you can do 2 24-hour fasts in a single week. This is where autophagy really starts kicking in. Autophagy is your body's cellular cleanup process. It breaks down damaged proteins, clears out the dysfunctional broken parts, and recycles cellular debris, which essentially just means your cells are rebuilding. It's like giving your cells a deep cleaning session. And autophagy is one of the key mechanisms that reverses metabolic dysfunction. But here's what makes this phase so doable. You're on a GLP-1, so appetite is already suppressed. And if you've added peptides, like we talked about, then your body just becomes efficient at mobilizing fat. So you're not white-knuckling through the hunger. You genuinely feel fine. Fasting beyond 24 hours requires proper monitoring, electrolyte management, and guidance on when to break the fast and how to break the fast. You need someone that's going to help track your responses, adjust your approach, and makes sure that you're not creating problems. This is a powerful tool, but it needs to be respected and done properly, or it can make you worse. The research on extended fasting is still emerging, which is exactly why we do it under medical supervision. It's super crucial. And by the way, this is why ultimately I created the Flow protocol, to give people like you structured, medically supervised framework for therapeutic long fasting on your GLP-1 meds. And here's something most people don't understand. The magic isn't just in the fasting itself. It's how you refeed after the fast. You can't break a 48-hour fast with a massive carb-heavy meal. You're gonna feel like crap. You need to ease back into it with protein, easy-to-digest foods. I always say like soups, bone broth that has some protein, or like lean protein sources, and then you slowly introduce more normal foods. This will prevent the insulin spike that could undo a lot of the metabolic benefit that you just created. And again, this is why medical supervision that I mentioned is crucial, especially for these longer fasts. Pillar number 3, diet optimization. This is where we double the fat to muscle muscle loss ratio, and this is huge. And the main piece here is fixing insulin resistance through carbohydrate reduction. Everything else that we're doing, the GLP-1s, the peptides, the fasting, they're all going to work better when you're not constantly spiking insulin when you're eating with higher carbohydrate meals. Here's the reality. Every time you eat carbohydrates, your body releases insulin to shuttle that glucose into your cells, the sugar. And if you're insulin resistant, your body has to release even more insulin to get the job done. And that chronically elevated insulin is what keeps you stuck. So low carb eating isn't just about weight loss. It's about giving your insulin levels a chance to normalize. And when you reduce carbohydrates significantly, your insulin levels stay low throughout the day, not just when you're fasting. So your cells can become more sensitive to the insulin that's released. And that's the goal here. And that insulin resistance that we keep talking about, it starts reversing. And I want to remind you guys, insulin resistance is the opposite of insulin sensitivity. If you become less resistant, you become more sensitive. If you become more sensitive, you become less resistant. Just want to make that clear. In our protocol, we're targeting 50 grams or less of net carbs. You don't have to go for 20. You don't have to go ultra zero. You can. But what's cool about this is you get some wiggle room. And I've tried to do it with patients. And it's a struggle for most patients. After an extended period of time, it becomes unsustainable. But 50 grams of net carbs, that gives you some wiggle room. You can throw in some low glycemic fruits like berries, maybe even a small amount of potato here and there, a little bit of rice. You can actually live like a normal human being while you're trying to keep your insulin levels low enough to reverse the resistance. This is why low carb and fasting work so synergistically. They're both targeting insulin from different angles. Fasting gives you extended periods with no insulin release at all, and low carb keeps insulin levels manageable even when you're eating. Here's where most people on GLP-1s make a massive mistake. They get so focused on eating less that they forget to eat enough at the right times. So let's talk about protein. You need to be hitting about 130 to 150 grams of protein daily. Here's what happens on GLP-1 without adequate protein. Your appetite is suppressed. You're naturally eating less, but your body needs energy. So it starts breaking down tissue for fuel. And if you're not giving it enough protein, it will happily break down muscle tissue right alongside fat. There's a big difference between this tissue and this tissue. You want to burn this, but you don't want to burn this. I can't stress that enough. They both weigh about a pound, but you can see the size difference. This is why some people lose weight on GLP-1s, but end up looking soft and weak. They lost 40 pounds, but 20 of that weight loss was muscle. Their body composition barely changed. Their metabolism is now slower because they have less active tissue. Remember, this muscle right here burns more calories at rest than this tissue right here. So even though the GLP-1 is blunting your appetite, you have to be intentional about protein. Track it, hit your target, get it from whole food sources such as meat, fish, eggs, poultry. If you need to supplement with protein powder to hit your numbers, then do it. Now here's the third piece of diet optimization, and this one surprises so many of you. You need to get adequate calories. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. You're trying to lose weight. Shouldn't you just be eating as little as possible, or shouldn't you be continually creating a deficit day in and day out? And no, that's not the case, because you will plateau if you do that. When you undershoot calories too aggressively for too long, your metabolism adapts. It thinks it's starving, and so everything slows down to conserve energy. That's when you start getting symptoms, and I know a lot of you guys are experiencing this, instead of just hunger. And this is why we tell people, aim to eat close to your total energy expenditure on non-fasting days. And that's how you avoid the plateau that everybody on GLP-1 eventually hits when they're following those cookie cutter protocols. So let me recap on pillar 3. Low carb, 50 grams of net carbs or less to fix insulin resistance, high quality protein, about 130 to 150 grams daily to preserve the muscle, and adequate total calories to prevent metabolic shutdown. At the end of the day, get those 3 things right, and you're setting yourself up for sustainable fat loss without destroying your metabolism in the process. But none of this matters if you're not doing pillar 4, resistance training, because without it, you're going to lose muscle no matter how much protein you eat, and losing muscle is the fastest way to wreck your metabolism permanently. Let me explain why. Let me start by talking about Jennifer, because her story perfectly illustrates why this is non-negotiable. Jennifer was a 42-year-old mom of 3 who came to us after losing 30 pounds in her first 4 months on Ozempic. She was thrilled with the numbers on the scale, but when we reviewed her body composition scan, her face went pale. You've lost 30 pounds, that's amazing, but 18 of those were muscle. You only lost 12 pounds of fat. She looked at me confused, but I'm losing weight. Isn't that the goal? And I was like, no. Hard reality here, the goal isn't losing weight. The goal is losing fat while preserving muscle, because muscle is metabolically active tissue. It's the engine that burns calories. Every pound of muscle that you lose makes it harder to keep the weight off long term. And right now, you're dismantling your metabolic machinery. You're making yourself more insulin resistant now and long term by losing muscle mass. And that's the part that people struggle to understand. What most people on GLP-1s don't get is that your body doesn't care whether it breaks down fat or muscle for energy when you're in a calorie deficit. It will use whatever is easiest. And if you're not giving your muscles a reason to stick around through heavy resistance training with adequate protein that we talked about earlier, your body will absolutely sacrifice the muscle to preserve fat stores. And here's the doubling effect in action. Without resistance training, you might lose 60% fat, 40% muscle. But with proper resistance training and adequate protein intake, you flip that into 90% fat, 10% muscle, more than doubling the quality of your weight loss. Now, here's where it gets even more important. Muscle mass directly improves insulin sensitivity. So when you lose muscle on a GLP-1, you're not just slowing your metabolism, you're actually making yourself more insulin resistant, and it becomes harder to reverse. This is why resistance training isn't optional. It's absolutely essential. You need to be hitting the gym or doing resistance training work at home at a minimum of 2 to 3 times per week. Focus on compound movements, exercise that work multiple muscle groups at once, squats, deadlifts, presses, rows, pull-ups. These are the movements that give you the most metabolic bang for your investment, for your time. Now, Jennifer, the one who crossed her arms when I first brought up weight training, she lost another 25 pounds, but this time she actually gained muscle mass at the same time. Her body looked completely different. She was smaller than she had been in college, but stronger than she'd been ever in her life before. I'm gonna tell you about Lisa. She went into full-blown zombie mode when she came to see us. The metabolic reset is for plateaus. You were losing weight and then the weight loss stopped. This is very, very common in GLP-1s because you haven't been taught to properly eat and how to prevent it. So Lisa, she was 6 months into her journey. First 4 months were incredible, 40 pounds lost, she was thrilled. But the last 2 months, nada, not a single pound. And when we got to looking at her protocol, she told us she was eating 900 calories a day, exhausted, cold, all the symptoms we told you about earlier. I'm wearing a sweater in freaking 75 degrees. I can't think straight at work. The brain fog is so bad that I have to reread emails 3 times to freaking understand them, and I'm too tired to even consider working out. So we pulled up her food logs, and she wasn't exaggerating, by the way. Some days she was barely hitting about 800 calories. The GLP-1s had crushed her appetite so completely that she accidentally starved herself into this situation. Metabolic shutdown, aka starvation mode, aka zombie mode. You're not in a plateau, you're in this metabolic situation where your body has slowed things down. So I told her, we're going to increase your calories slowly and strategically. We're going to adjust how you're approaching the other pillars during the reset. So week number 1, we added 150 calories to her daily intake. Then week number 2, another 200, and then another 200, and then another 200. Week by week, we systematically increased her calories. We were paying attention to how she felt. This is the communication between our coaches and our clients. We're looking for improvements in symptoms, brain fog, tiredness, constipation, feeling cold. And also we're paying attention to the scale, because when you do the reset correctly, the scale won't increase while you're systematically eating more and more and more. We got her all the way up to eating 1,800 calories a day. Her symptoms resolved. 1 month later, it was like a night and day difference. Think about that for a second. You're eating twice as many calories now, and you're still not gaining weight. This is proof that the metabolism sped up to compensate, right? You came out of zombie mode. You came out of starvation mode. And this is where you were at the beginning. And this is how you have metabolic power to move forward with so that you can continue to actually lose weight again. Now, during the reset, you're going to maintain carbohydrate intake. We don't want to restrict carbs during this phase because your thyroid and metabolism actually needs those carbohydrates to recover. And you're pausing the long fasting. No 24-hour, no 48-hour fast during the reset. Time restricted, 16/8 is fine, but we're not doing anything more than that. We're just keeping the diet clean and we're systematically increasing the intake. All right, we've covered some great pillars here to double your GLP-1 results by fixing root causes, insulin resistance, and inflammation. Peptide enhancement like Sloop 332 and AOD 9604 are going to create metabolic flexibility to make fasting easier. Pillar number 2, strategic fasting, is going to amplify your insulin resistance, which is the root cause of all these issues. Pillar number 3, optimizing your diet with 50 grams of net carbs or less. Keep your protein intake high. This is crucial. And then finally, resistance training to preserve muscle and build metabolic machinery. I know this is a lot to implement on your own, coordinating peptides, managing fasting protocols, dialing in your nutrition, adjusting your GLP-1 dose, tracking your response. It requires expertise and medical supervision, and to do this safely and effectively. If you want our team to guide you through this personally and create a customized protocol based on your specific situation, which, let me be clear, that's working with my medical team and then working with me personally and or my coaches, depending on what level of access you want, book your discovery call now. Use the link that I'm going to leave in the description. We're going to assess everything, exactly where you are, what's blocking your progress. We'll do some proper labs and we'll get to the root cause and create a tailored program. Because my promise to you, and this is what I do, is I will help you achieve lasting weight loss, get you to that goal, and then with my medical team's help, reduce your dose to a microdose. Because I think maintaining your weight loss on a microdose of GLP-1s is the wave of the future, and that's how we can prevent the progression of essentially all the diseases that are the end result of being overweight and obese. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see the 10 most common mistakes that people make on GLP-1s, check out that video right there. I'll see you guys later.